Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Mending Threads. This is your safe place and your stronghold for whole body wellness. We have with us a team today, but first I want to follow up from last week. On last week, Doc Walker and I discussed what pandemic might be, what trauma is, and we looked at the idea that stress, prolonged stress, stress that lends you powerlessness to control the changes in the moment, increases different chemicals in the body, and actually then might take you to a paralysis or fight or flight. And what happens is that if in fact we're given this in a common sense manner so that we can understand when we do have controllables that we can manage. We did talk about on last week how culture may impact the way that we think about it and how others think about um, individuals within treatment and how we access treatment and the differences in how we do that. We want to follow up today with the goal of coming out of this discussion. And next week we will follow up of looking at exactly how to mobilize the community and individuals of color or African Americans, Hispanic, and others toward treatment and knowing how to access beneficial treatment within their community. So we have with us persons from Harris Health Center this morning, and we also have with us Doc Walker from Texas Southern University, also with University of Houston and the Shrine as a pastor, associate pastor there. So we're going to be looking at it from both historical, spiritual, and practical as a provider as to how we handle that. So first, I wanted to ask Miss and I'm going to mess people's names up this morning. Miss Anderson, if you could help us understand the whole idea of how this cultural trauma or anger impacts what you do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lewis, for having us. I
Mm-hmm.
am Aisha Anderson with the Harris Center, working under Texans Recovering Together under the COVID 19 grant. Trauma, anger, all of the above in the community, has impacted the way, you know, the community responds to the COVID 19. For one, lack of information. There isn't maybe enough information about, well, there's a plethora of information, but how do we access that information? You know, um, Reading, reaching out to the resources that are available to you. We are one of those resource hubs. But everyone, doesn't know that we exist. So that has an effect on the community, not knowing exactly where to go. Or like you mentioned earlier, the stigma. Am I weak for reaching out for help, for this anger, for um, the disparities, that we see? Am I weak for acknowledging that and and subsequently getting the help that I need? So it has impacted the community of color a great deal. And I'm a little excited for us to get into that this morning.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Okay, then, and then we also have with us Miss Reyes, um, who's I know that is really in a community activist and really involved in the church community. Not that the others are not, but I just know her from that area. And but what I wanted to ask you, Miss Reyes, in terms of what Miss Anderson says, how have you experienced um, the COVID or the sense of trauma within the Hispanic community?
Well, unfortunately, Hispanics are being impacted in a very, very sad situation with COVID. Number one, because some of them don't have medical insurance due to their legal status. Another one is because many of them have low paying jobs that they're not able to afford medical insurance. So in the church that I'm involved in, we see that a lot. And so it is kind of sad, and like Miss Anderson said earlier, also is the stigma. A lot of times as well, if people know they're going to think bad about me. So that is kind of another situation that we need to overcome is the stigma that it comes when we're dealing with mental illnesses.
They
And
say I wanted you to explain either one of you, but I wanted to also hear from Mr. Rios. Your specialty is what, Mr. Rios?
I'm a crisis counselor as well.
Okay, then
I reach out to the community and try and find resources for individuals out in the
that's right.
community.
So, in terms of access to resources, I understand in terms of what Ms. Reyes was speaking about. Um, how have you? I see that there are approximately 66% in the area of Hispanics and African Americans. I think African Americans is like 66, and Hispanics are like 83 in terms of
Hmm.
incidences of
yeah,
not accessing help or not following up with providers. How do you help them in terms of the resources? What do you do differently to make sure?
Well, personally, you just have to be able to communicate with individuals in a proper manner. Actually guiding them to the right resources. Sometimes even guiding them to resources that include, the language or include, the culture. So I know recently I was able to acquire some resources from the local immigration and legal coalition. So that's
Hmm.
how I've been kind of helping out the Latino community is to connect them with individuals who are more understanding about their culture, and that makes it a little bit easier for them to seek the help, to seek the resources that are available for them here in Houston in the Harris County area.
Yes. Mhm. Oh, thank you. So I see. That's good. So you inferred some things, and I want to see if Mr. Keller and Doc Walker could chime in on interventions that you might select or elect to use from a cultural point of view to help persons within the community. Because you mentioned that you wanted to do it in a manner in which they could accept it or understand it. So, can we speak about um, that, Mr. Keller? Can you just give me any little hint of how you would go about doing that? So the person would know how to access it with you or feel more comfortable.
Yes, ma'am. I guess one of the first things that I would do is um, I know that a lot of people that don't have insurance, money is always an issue. So I would try to find the ones that are free, that is very easy to access and has a good response. I will actually contact them and I would sit there and walk through with them so that they're comfortable and they're not doing it by themselves.
Yes.
A lot of times, if they're put into a uncomfortable position or they don't even want to be there. So if we're there guiding them, that opens up so many doors as we go forward because I do feel like a lot of people, when it comes to mental health, they're real uneasy because of the fact that what other people are thinking about, and that allows them to draw back so that they don't get the proper treatment.
Yes. I'm in I'm doing a group with people right now in the morning. I'll start this shortly. But one of the guys had mentioned in the group, he mentioned that how he was disenfranchised by his own family when he felt like that he was having symptoms, and that
Mm.
his sisters his sisters sort of did not want to have relationships with him or be close to him, and how he grew up and felt isolated from his family. And right now, during the COVID and also other cultural incidences of violence around African Americans within the community, he is feeling more separated and from family and from community. So this feeling of separateness is escalating. So I wanted to ask Doc Walker in that the anger, and anybody can respond, but I wanted him to lead this part. If we could just broach some of the questions or responses to this situation, as it is kind of typical or is prevalent within our community as it relates to anger, and is it justified or not, or can we justify anything, those feelings?
You're asking me, can we justify the anger that we might be feeling?
Yes, yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, well, I would say yes. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that, Dr. Maulana Karenga would say that Black people, people of color, are always suffering from cultural trauma, because so much of our uh, ancient or historical cultural ways of being, we were violently divorced from those and punished for living life, expressing life in ways that were culturally comfortable and traditional for us, and also another culture was violently imposed upon us. And so that war is always going on inside of our heads, inside of our spirit, whether we know it or not. So um, cultural trauma and the angers and stress and the depression and all those things that derive from that, they're there all the time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr., he would call that term, he talks about the fact that Black people have been niggerized, where a whole process that was taken to move a human being to a state of them rejecting their own selves for the benefit of another group, rejecting a love for themselves, whether it's their physical features, whether it's their connections, and this has us at war with ourselves, because culturally, connection is one of the most foundational things for African people, for Black people. That whole notion of I am because we are. And so when you were talking about that one young man who feels isolated, uh, that is one of from a traditional historical African perspective, that is one of the biggest fears that we have. Uh, Last week we were talking about the story of Cain and Abel, right? Where Cain kills his brother Abel, and God says, where's your brother?" And Cain says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Well, hell yeah, you're your brother's keeper, right? And then God punishes him with isolation. And Cain's response, I told you last week, was the most African thing I'd ever heard in my life, right? Cain says to God, "I wish you would have just killed me," because for African people, not being connected, not being in community is the source of the most pain, trauma that we
Mm-hmm.
can bear. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yes.
the anger being there, I can definitely understand that.
And anybody else can respond to their experiences in working with a person, or your experiences in terms of that, because I wanted to hear. I do know that there's more to that anger.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. I agree with Dr. Walker, and part of our, effort is to inform and allow these people in the community, the individuals in the community that we serve, to express that anger and validate it. He
Mm-hmm.
said, yes, it's justifiable. We're going to validate that anger. Anger is a natural emotion, right? Don't be ashamed to feel angry. Feel the emotion, but what are we going to do from there?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
So we're going to be present with it, but
Mm-hmm.
then what will we do?
Mhm.
Hey, Miss
And I
So,
know
Anderson,
that
Miss
many
Anderson,
believe.
just FYI, I'm not a doctor. Not Dr. Lewis
okay.
calls me doctor for whatever
I
reason.
just call him Doc Walker because he just seems to know a whole lot of stuff, and so I call him Doc Walker. He's just so
I
well informed.
I wanted to be respectful. Okay.
That's right.
Dr. Walker.
I just
Okay.
call him Doc Walker, and
Okay.
because he's like a cultural doctor,
Mhm.
and religious, and he knows the integration. And I can't wait till we get into all of that. That is going to be so awesome. I can't wait, because that's going to be very meaningful, and healing. It's going to be healing, is what I'm saying. And the more we can talk about it from an integrated perspective, is the more we're going to feel healed. I believe, and
Mhm.
as I read more and more, and over the decades, as I can go on and be honest about it, of my life, I see that we part of the illness that we have is that we separate all components of how we think in our lives.
Mhm.
And there was a time when, and of course, most of you don't remember because your faces look so young, is that it was all integrated. Years ago, it was just all integrated. And when you were in a community and you had stress, you went in your community to talk to the mother of the community or the father of the community, and
Mhm.
they were well versed on what, if you were sick, that person knew how to go and get something to do while they were talking to you. They were
Mhm.
giving you something to help you as well, or leading you in that direction for resources. They were there when you were lonely, when you went to a funeral. All of those things are integrative thing. And so I think we're sitting here this morning looking at how to relink and in a manner that will heal ourselves and the community.
But one thing we have to, I think, confront is, and I think your other guests have already mentioned this, is this idea that there's something wrong with seeking help,
Right.
Yes.
right? And I know that that is a huge cultural issue within the African American community. I know, and I have friends who are psychologists, and they say Black folk are getting better about actively seeking professional help, and that's a good thing. But for so
Mhm.
Mhm.
long, you know, we were viewed it was viewed as problematic. You were viewed as being touched or crazy, or I mean, whatever term we wanted to apply to it. But not only that, we were made to feel as if we were showing a lack of faith in God. We were told if there's an issue, put it all on Jesus, put it all on the pastor, put it all on the church, and everything will be all right. And if you are even thinking about seeking help outside of that circle, there's something wrong with your faith.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
not
Mm,
looking at it from the standpoint of, well, God is working with and touching these psychologists so that
Mhm.
God can give you the help that you need. We wouldn't look at it from that aspect. And so folk who wanted to seek help were made to feel guilty about even having that desire. And that's something I'm glad to hear from my psychologist friends that we're getting better, but I think we
yes.
we still have a ways to go there.
Oh
Yes.
yes.
And I think you really hit on it. I have many patients when they come in, the first thing that they say is, I really believe in my faith. I really have faith. And so they feel guilty
Mm-hmm.
about being there because they feel that they have failed God. They
Right.
feel that they have failed their belief, but yet they're hearing voices. Yet they can't get up out of the bed. It just takes them. So one of the things that we do is we talk about, because I think I don't profess to know a lot, but I do remember reading that it's asked for us to look for wise counsel
Yeah.
when you're doing. And so, how do you find wise counsel? And the literature says that when you do, make sure you interview to determine that the person comes from a perspective that they can identify with your pain, but not over identify with it. That they can isolate what it is to do, because how can you heal someone if you have no idea of their struggle? So you would begin to look at their struggle as something else, as a technique or a way of integrating the community. So let me give you an example. So one therapist sent the person back and told them what they needed to do was to divest from their family. They needed to write a letter, and because they were having difficulty with their family members, to write a letter and no longer visit with their family. Well, when they did this, the family member, the end of the patient, became seriously ill, and they had no idea of what they were doing because they had not reconnected the individual to another family member closer before they asked them to do that, one. And secondly, because people of color generally are group or family oriented, or more community oriented, together oriented. And so therefore what happened is you escalated the illness. Okay, and so one of
Mhm.
the things to seek wise counsel means that you must seek someone who understands um, your modus, what they might say, of living, your modus of operandi in terms of living, your need, your cultural upbringing. And so that's one of the points I think we had. The World Health Organization says that there are four things that I want us to talk about today. One we're on now is that people should understand their symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
that, that they should understand that. The other is to begin to talk about and understand what a stigma is and how that relates to racism or how that relates to access. The other one is community support, that it's a difference in community. How do you rally community support? Is another thing that we should be talking about right now today. And then we have already begun to talk about how to define and determine the resources that we need. You know, what do you do and how do you be in charge of accessing your resources?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought maybe those four things we could now look at. The stigma, how would we actually began to look at the stigma, the different ways that people have. All of us don't look at mental health in the same manner.
Yes.
Different fact, yes. And so we could look at the different ways that we perceive mental health and then what can we do about it?
Well, I think that, like with our program, crisis counseling, once you reach out, you know, we're there to help prioritize those needs of whatever you need in the community. As far as the stigma, once you start working with the individual or families or group from the community, I mean, you could show them with example. We like to see proof, right? We need examples. Here, this is a community setup where these services are available. Here are some testimonials, right, of people who are happy about the services. So we show and prove, to break down some of those stigmas that, I just need to sweep everything under the rug. I just need to get over it. You brought up a good point about faith. We meet everyone where they are, and that spirituality piece is a part of holistic healing. So we meet them where they are. And I just say, okay, this is the work part. You have the faith. Now, here's the work.
Yeah.
So the work is actually working with us, the individuals in the community who are the resource hub, to get what you need when you need it. So that's how we kind of break down the stigma within our program. Each of us work a little different. We're unique in how we approach it, but that's my approach. I meet them where they are. No jargon, no I'm this authority person and you are not. I'm going to meet you where you are. I can relate to what you're going through. I can empathize with what you're going through. And you'll see the stigma slowly break down when people see that you truly have their best interests at heart.
Yes, yes, yes. So I
And
wanted to hear,
also,
yes,
and
ma'am.
also something that I would like to add is that whenever you meet a client where he or she is at, that gives them power
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because they can see what they want to work on. So you kind of, when you meet them there, they kind of open up more, and then
Mhm.
see them excel in so many ways, because sometimes they're just stuck
Mm-hmm.
and they're just kind of in this little box. And then once you say, okay, let's talk about, tell me what you want, how you see yourself in 7 days, in or
Mhm.
5 days or 24 hours, whatever case may be. And that kind of gives them the chance to see, okay, I can do this. I just need someone to give me the little push, to hold my
Mhm.
hand. And that's basically that's what I try to do. I should use my I statements. And
Mhm.
because I've been working with people with mental health for a number of years, and I think that's how I see, when you meet them where they are, that's their
Mhm.
beginning for them. And then you will see them get much better.
So
Mhm.
I wanted to hear from Mr. Reyes and Mr. Keller because I wanted to see what your experiences are with men because men, culturally speaking, tend to, and I guess Doc Walker, you could also address it from a person, your experience working with people, tend to resist it more than women. Tend to have an idea that maybe this has something to do with my manhood. I'm less of a man if I then seek any kind of even just talk about it.
Well, I
Okay.
know as an agency, sorry, I know
Mm-hmm.
as an agency, we incorporate, like, I think it's called peer partners as
Mm-hmm.
well. And so these are individuals who have gone through the system, or individuals who have experienced, who are experiencing symptoms, or we're experiencing symptoms. People who have gone through, like I said, gone through the system and have a better understanding of what it requires or what it is, and so that kind of helps to connect people who are now coming into the system, and lets them see that there's somebody else who's gone through it, and allows
Yes.
them to kind of feel more at ease about seeking and receiving services. So
Yes.
I know as an agency, that's one thing that they do to help out individuals, to try and cut off that stigma, to try and have individuals more open to receive services. So that's one thing as far as an agency. Uh, Me myself, I know that I just kind of empathize with them, with people in the community, men or women, whatever, because I think that everybody in general, as far as minorities, I know I can speak from the Latino base. It's seen as a sign of weakness. I think even me growing up, we were told that you always have to be working, you have to be on the move at all times. Vacations are unheard of in the Latino community. I think at a certain level, and so whenever, like, you guys touching back with what you guys were saying earlier, um, to us it's more of a, oh, well, you're feeling sad, you're this or that. That means you're just not doing enough. You need to do more stuff. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's something that happens a lot. It's said, and I've heard a lot in the Latino community. And so that's something, having a better understanding about the cultural side of it kind of helps me to talk to the individuals, men, like I said, men or women, and so talk to them, because that applies towards the women as well. Oh, that means you're not cleaning the house enough. You need to clean the backyard. You need to do this. You need to do that. You've got too much time on your hands to be thinking about that. So I'll talk to them. Hey, it's okay to not be okay. Like, you need to address it. You need to be able to, um, seek help. You need to be able to look out for yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
things of that sort, making people realize things that they haven't heard before. That's what helps me. Even with the men, it's just a matter of knowing better, being better educated about the culture, and then kind of
Mhm.
trying to go with that, kind of trying to bring that into consideration, and then talking about the reality, which the reality is that it's important for us to take care of ourselves as well, because
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the same thing in the African American community as it is in the Hispanic community, where we tend to look out for each other a lot. We want to be there for each other. And the Latino
Mm-hmm.
community, that's very big as well. As, oh, John Doe is not feeling well. He's sick. Oh, well, let's send him some soup. Let's do this. Let's do that. But in the midst of all that, we tend to forget about our own selves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's one thing that I know I've tried to, that I do a lot, is that I bring that, into light with individuals. I say, hey, look, I know that this is how it usually goes, but we need to, redirect that energy towards yourselves as well. We're important as well. I'm important. You are important. Use it, and
Mm-hmm.
you have, you need to be able to do that. So that's one thing that I do, and I think seems very basic, but it's something that a lot of people don't realize sometimes, and it's good to open people's eyes to that fact.
I like the model so much. I want to say this. We have been very blessed to get like a $3,000 scholarship per person for people to complete the mental health coaching program. Like for peer counseling, but actually go out and
Mhm.
help people, and also support agencies and persons within the community. So that I know, and so we're going to look at that, continue that model and reinforce that model within the community. So we're looking for 300 people to sign up within the community to take the course. There is a minimum. The only donation they have to make is minimum 150. But as you know, that course, that certified mental health course itself is $2,800. But they're going to get cultural training as well as how to work with diverse cultures, and we're going to supervise them as well. So we're going to really promote that model because that's very viable. That's going to be a saving grace, as they say, for our community.
Right. At reach, someone that they can reach right away.
Yes, yes, yes. Somebody that knows how they feel, can talk to them, know how to do it. Yes, that's gonna be awesome.
And
So
we'll
I
get
think
away with what happens in this house stays in this house. That's
yes, yes,
another commonality, right?
that's right. That's true. That's true. And so what secrets do you need to hold and which ones you need to
Right.
let go of? And so I think you're right. Somebody was saying, I think it's Miss Reyes or you, somebody was, but it's really like what you control what you can. This anger and frustration is so real that I'm having more and more people coming in. And I think I know that it's there, but I didn't know it was so pervasive. So in other words, I'm having more and more men come and call for help because they're feeling powerless of not being able to make changes in their home and their environment and the threat for their children and the health. And so now we're talking about controlling your controllables,
Right.
to
Exactly.
decrease the stress so you can begin to see direct. So I would like for us to talk a little bit about um, helping people understand their symptoms and how to control the controllables. That would be something I think the audience might want to hear.
Okay.
Yeah.
As it relates
Oh, go ahead.
as it relates to anger, you're right. We have seen an increase in calls with men, and this, I don't know what to do. It was all there was anger before, but now you add COVID-19 to that. And why is that? Well, you're feeling a sense that you have lost control. And everyone wants to be in control of their lives, right? And it's like I no longer have any control, so now I'm internalizing that. And so what do we do? Well, my approach when we work with individuals is to, like I said, validate the anger. I understand, why you're angry. Now, anger is a natural emotion. So is happiness. So is sorrow. So is fear. All of those are natural emotions. Anger is just one of the 8 primary emotions. So what are we going to do with this anger? Anger has 3 jobs amongst the other primary emotions. It's going to validate, communicate, or motivate. You have one of these 3 ways to release that anger. Which route do you want to go? Are you angry because there's something you truly want to communicate? Well, how do we communicate that? Are you angry because it's motivating you to do something different? Okay, what is it you'd like to do? Or are you angry because it's validating something else? Let's get to the bottom of that. So, yes, in men and women alike, but yes, we have seen an increase in men.
An increase in men.
Yes. And so it's mostly when you really get to the bottom of it, control, feeling like you said, powerless. So we deal with, like you said, the controllables. What can you control? And what can you control today? Let's not worry ahead of time. What can you control today? What can we do today? You can control how you think.
Yeah.
Because how you think controls how you feel, controls how you behave. So let's get to the thought first. What are we thinking? How are we thinking? So let me show you how to be dialectical. And then I break that word down. Okay. Let me show you how to think from different perspectives, being open-minded about things, because it'll reduce some of that stress, you're feeling due to the feeling that you have a lack of control in your life. But you are in control.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. Dr. Cornel West talks about nihilism or nihilism. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's basically total a feeling of total helplessness, that there's
Mhm.
absolutely nothing you can do to change your condition. Absolutely no. That's why I was just really excited. I'm really excited about the conversation.
Yes.
Ms. Reyes talked about, if you meet folk where they are, they recognize their power. They recognize that they
Yes.
can do something, right? But with
Yes.
COVID-19, so much of our quote unquote powerlessness, or at least perceived powerlessness, has been magnified. We see massive deaths of friends and family. There's nothing we can do about it.
Mhm.
Healthcare inequalities that hit the Black and Latino community more than any others. We feel
Mhm.
helpless. Criminal just injustices
In
have
general.
been magnified. What can we do about it? One thing I would hope that we would do is change our language, and it may change how we feel about seeking help. And I can just speak from a personal, from my own church experience. In our church, uh, we are taught over and over and over again that you are not less than, that you are not less than a man or not less than a full
Right.
woman for recognizing that you need help. In fact, we talk about how that is one of the scariest things that you can do. Most challenging things you can do is look at yourself and be honest with where you are. Um,
Mhm.
if you're willing to do that, uh, that should be celebrated. But then to take that next step and actually call somebody to seek the help that you need,
Mhm.
communities, that takes a whole lot of courage, man.
Yeah.
That takes a whole lot of courage to say, to communicate with someone that you don't know, um, seeking help. We need to start celebrating that as courageous,
Mhm.
as like most ultimate powerful moves of courage that a person. I think if we could
That
start
positive
speaking in,
reinforcement.
right, I think if we
Yes.
could start speaking in that language, we
Mhm.
may be able to change the culture, change the attitude.
Yes.
And
I
also
think that
sometimes changing the visual. If you begin to look at that process of getting rid of the things that you don't need and putting in the things that you do need, it gives them a visual of getting rid of garbage, getting rid of the things that just don't work. And that tends to empower them,
Mhm.
particularly if you can get them to move toward the moment.
Mhm.
To make decisions in the moment is one of the keys that I'm finding, to lock into the breath, the things that have been given to them that moment in that day. Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think
So,
that I
mhm.
think that growing up, you're not as a man, you're not taught these coping skills to deal with anger. Depending on how your family structure is and dynamic was, you hold all that baggage in. When you get bigger, you don't know how to deal with the anger when you're surrounded by with family or others you have to care for. And especially for men, it's bad. It's hard enough trying to get us to say, we're wrong or we admit we're wrong, then trying to get us to say, hey, we need help. There's something wrong with us. I mean, that's a huge challenge. So I think besides men feeling kind of weak, we just don't have the skills or the level of communication to reach out to somebody and say, hey, can somebody please help me?
Yes, yes. Even for that's for the personal support, or the to even ask for community support or family support.
Right.
So maybe one of the things it was, so before we end today, maybe we could together come up with some viable steps that people could, because I know next week what we really want to talk about is we want to move into an area of teaching coping. All of the things that we talked about, we want to know the history first next week, and then the coping. Next week, we're going to have the chef on. And one of the things that we realized is that the COVID, the trauma that we experience, are tied into cultural access to stress. if I could call it that way, the experiencing of stress, and that experiencing of stress is tied into so closely our chronic disease and our health status and what we do. And we're gradually trying to look at that stress then is so tied into our cravings and our eating behaviors and the choices of how not and the choices of the food, but also how we think about the food and why do we want that food
Mhm.
in order to resolve the stress that we're experiencing. So we want to look at that next week and then possibly look at how to get into the coping behaviors, so to speak. And so I know in the history, Doc Walker has spoken of that there were some real um, history provoking moments that brought us to realizing and defining health, access to physicians, the food that we eat, and those kinds of things. We really want to look at that and look at what can we do about it in the community as we move toward training people and getting people to open their hearts and minds about healing. But before we end, I would like for each one of us to just look at what do we think we need to deal with in terms of these four things: community support, understanding the symptoms, cultural stigma, and the resources or coping behaviors. What is it that we need to leave the audience with today?
Okay, I would say that in terms of community, support, we as mental health professionals, and are on the front lines with mental health, um, the COVID grant and those alike, we need to make sure when we're communicating about mental health is in a positive light, always, because people are listening. And so if
Mm-hmm.
we're not as positive, or if we're saying some things that could cause people to second guess, then could we truly blame them for not wanting to seek out those resources? So we need to be, truly believe in what we do and want to help others. And that's going to shine through to other people. They will see that light and want to receive that help. As far as coping, we talked about anger. We do refer many in the community for mental health services where they can, you know, engage in emotion regulation, because that's what's needed for the anger and the
Mm-hmm.
frustration. Just learning how to regulate those emotions and assign meaning to them. Not to tell you not to be angry or frustrated, but how to deal with it.
Yes.
Um, and the stigma, again, breaking it down by meeting those where they are.
Yes. Very good. Uh-huh. That's good. Anybody else?
Kind of touching with what Aisha was saying, I think that is very important for you to allow yourself to feel emotions. Sometimes we kind of just brush it off. We just try and forget about it. And just not. It ultimately just all bottles up, right? It all ends up, you end up getting all these emotions, and it's just like James was saying earlier, you don't know how to deal with it, and it just explodes. It comes out at the end. But I think that it's very important for us to allow ourselves to, feel emotion. Sometimes it's good to cry, or sometimes it's good to, just be in the know of what your emotions are. That way you can, like, you can know better what to do. You can know how to take better care of yourself, and ultimately, you will feel less overwhelmed by those emotions. I think that that's just very important as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Recognizing
I would
your
just,
emotions, I mean, that's definitely very important because a lot of people don't know how to recognize their feelings or how to deal with it. So that's the first step. If they're able to take a step and say, hey, I do have some emotional issues, then we're able to help whoever is needed. But if they're not um, recognizing it or even saying, there's something slightly wrong with me, then it's very hard to reach the people that have these mental health issues.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I want to add to what Jen just said, but also when we recognize that something may be going on is how we communicate. And I think communication is very, very important. So then we can get the help that we should need. And also we do in our there is a lot of referrals that we can do. There is a lot of assistance that people can go to, but just letting them know that the services are there and more or less guide them towards them.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to recognize that we all stand in need of
Yes.
healing, all of us. You may need healing of body. I may need healing of finance. This person may need healing of spirit,
Mm-hmm.
of our mental, emotional state. We all stand in need of healing. And I think one way we can help ourselves with that is by changing the way we teach about our historical figures. We teach about their lives as if they knew the outcomes of their decisions, as if they were supermen and superwomen. We don't teach their struggles. We don't teach
Yes.
their angst, their wrestling with the decisions that they made. We don't teach about Reverend Martin Luther King. We don't teach about the fact that he felt like he needed to get psychological help for the
Yeah.
depression that he was experiencing because he thought he was following God's will. But all the people that are claiming him today were telling him to shut the hell up when he was alive, and he was experiencing stress and depression and wanted to seek help, but
Yeah.
he didn't do it because he thought, number one, it was a stigma. His enemies would use it against him. But I think if we taught our historical figures as if they were real human beings, just like
Yes.
they
Yes.
were, just like we are, and they had struggles and challenges and doubts and worries and fears, I think
Yes.
that would allow us to recognize the fact that we all need some level of healing.
Yes.
Mr.
Well,
Walker brought up a great point about that EAP, about the having someone to use your psychological um, issues or disorders against you. We see a lot of that with working people. They don't
Mhm.
want to get that help. Cultural as well. They have the insurance maybe and can use their
mm-hmm.
EAP, but don't want to because they fear that the job will know or may feel that they're unfit for the job once it's found out what's truly going on.
Well, I
So
can
that's a great
personally say I
point.
Yes.
use the EAP, and I am so thankful. I am so personally thankful for that.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I tell
Good,
everybody,
good.
I keep with working with the type of work that I do in mental health, I keep me a therapist. Okay, so I keep me for years. I have me a therapist every Friday. Okay, then so I don't just talk about it. I know it works.
Right.
Both
Yes.
Yeah.
ways, both ways. So I want to thank you for being here. I know we'll see each other next week, but since we can't hold hands or whatever, I tell people when we like that to just put your hands next to the bars of your picture like this. Okay, like right next to your no, right next to the bars of the picture.
Oh, the
Yes,
bars.
right. Yeah, see, like one hand over
Yeah.
here and one hand over here. It looks like we're holding hands.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. Okay. So I shall see you all next week.
okay.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a
Bye
All
great
right.
one,
Bye-bye. Thank
everyone.
Thank you
you.
for being
Have
here.
a great
Right.
day.
All right.
Great. I'd like to thank you all for being with us today. We have had several people to be with us from the Harris Health Center. And of course, we've had our own Dr. I call him Doc Walker, um, from our cultural center and from the Shrine Church. He's also a pastor. So one of the things that I hope that you got from the show today is some techniques that you could use and a better understanding of mental health and how it can move us forward in our life. Stay in the moment. Remember this: renew beliefs, rebuild faith, reconnect families and communities. For it is what? It is what you believe, it is what you do that brings health, happiness, and success, not the circumstances. And we look forward to seeing you on next week, same time, same place. Thank you now.